We're on.
Good evening and welcome to Luna Nueva ShareAbout. This is where we come together with community members and we talk about wellness, healing. We talk about our resistance, our movements, things that are important to the community. And so today we have the great honor of bringing one of our community brothers, Aswad Aarif. First, let me introduce the ladies of Nueva. We have Sabrina, Holly Kalika, Luanda, or we call her Iyawo Lu, and myself, Asatu Hall. And so Aswad Aarif is a restorative trauma-informed facilitator and trainer for Catholic Charities. He's a program manager. He's also an artist, the director of Aswad Aarif Art and Design and of a community center in West Oakland, which he'll tell us a little bit more about. And we've asked him to join us this evening because we felt important to hear. Obviously, we're a collective of women healers and activists and artists, but we wanted to hear from our brothers about issues that are important in terms of educating our men and women and our youth. So without further ado, I would like to introduce, welcome, brother Aswad.
Peace. Thank you all so much for having me. Thank you for welcoming me into your space. And I look forward to sharing it with you as we journey towards healing and improving our community.
Thank you. So before we begin, I'm going to back up and ask our Iyawo Luanda to open us with a prayer, just to set our intention in our space, bring in our ancestors to this space. Iyawo.
Hi, good evening, greetings. We want to sorry, you just caught me off guard. I'm ready. So we want to welcome our ancestors into this space by first acknowledging Moyuba Olodumare, Moyuba Olofi, Moyuba Olorun, Moyuba Bobo Egun of all of us who are present at this moment on this call. May our Egun lead and guide and protect us always. May we come with open hearts and always walk in love. And may love always be the guiding force that will bind all of us to lift us up higher. Blessing to be here for each and every one of us. And may the words from this talk that we have reach everyone's ears who needs to hear the words.
Ashe.
Hey, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So, I think I would like to begin. We have some questions for you, but we also want to hear you speak about your work. So, why don't we begin there before we start our questions? Brother Aswad, why don't you tell us about your work, the things that are important to you, and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you mentioned in your introduction, I identify myself as an artist and as a person in the community who seeks to heal and repair. And I think probably that's kind of where my passions are lie in the place where those two parts of my identity converge. In my art, I am seeking to share with people not only my journey, but my understanding and my feeling of the journey of our people. We are always the subject of the work that I do. And in the community-based work that I do, I came to it in the sort of roundabout way, working with doing a lot of different types of social service work, really trying to find where my niche was and where I could actually be of use and make a difference. And the place that I kept landing was this really kind of tremendous need for healing. And it comes from this this trauma being the common denominator, with African and indigenous people in this country. The trauma is kind of like the common element, um, and a lot of the models and modes for treatment or response that I had come across, they were really sort of rooted around single incident trauma. They were really sort of rooted around someone having a single experience and needing to repair from that, or needing to heal from that. What we find more common in our communities is that the trauma is ongoing, and there is no sort of baseline to go back to, right? So nothing. So the healing approach is even different because it starts with understanding and first finding out what your baseline is, right? And we may be generations and generations past anybody in our families being in a place where people slept well and people felt safe and people in our family felt secure and felt like they had the language to express how they feel and the safety to be able to express how they feel. And so helping people to find that this is what life can be, if we kind of remove some of our, or not remove, but heal from some of the experiences that we've had. We start to see ourselves in a different frame. We may see ourselves less as broken people and more as people who have experienced something that we can heal from and have been healing from. We find lots of ways to heal every day. So and again, it takes me back to my art. A lot of the art that I do is around how we are a picture of resilience and strength. How we are the perfect model, the perfect explanation of what resilience and strength are. So that's my personal prayer every day, is to be a tool in the hands of the Creator, and a tool in the hands of the community, to help us to find that space where we are inhabiting the best that we can be.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to let my sisters ask some questions, but I
Mm-hmm.
do have a follow-up, and then I'm going to release the questions to them. And it's just because you mentioned your art, and I know your art. I know your visual art, but I also know the father, the husband. I know the interior designing and your artistry, and also it comes in many ways. The food, so many different ways. So I want to ask you about your book, Maybe I'm
Mm-hmm.
Happy, an emotional literacy book for kids. Now that's a different manifestation of your art, and I wonder if you can speak to that. And that's my last question.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So that's my first children's book that I published earlier this year, and I think the most interesting thing about it is I absolutely did not begin to begin it as writing a children's book. It actually started as a program designed for Black men that was rooted in an 8-week retreat, in an 8 weeks of retreat sessions, and in implementing some of the basics of it. And really what it was about helping Black men to access the language and tools to practice a different type of emotional intelligence, one that's really geared towards strengthening relationships, inhabiting greater autonomy, feeling a greater sense of self and self-confidence, and really kind of counteracting some of the negative experiences and messages that we've encountered, many of us throughout our lifetimes as living in this culture. And in doing that, I realized in a lot of the conversations that I was having and a lot of the circles I was leading, that maybe a greater need was for emotional literacy, right? Because as we kind of talked about how you feel, and it's my job, I do this every day. I talk about how I feel a lot, and the people around me, we talk about feelings and emotion and the context a lot. And as I was talking to kind of like everyday, people, we kept kind of coming back to, I feel some kind of way. I feel some kind of way. We're like, what does that mean? How do we express some kind of way? What does that actually mean? And we could probably peel back a little bit and get to anger, and then getting beneath anger was really kind of difficult for some of us, because literacy, emotional literacy, is more than just having the words. It's being able to connect those words with experience, impact, and outcome, right? Mm-hmm. So it's being able to say, I feel ... That means, it's going to impact me and others in this way. And then the outcome of that is going to be ... Because that's really the key to managing relationships. All relationships, whether they're work relationships or relationships as a husband or a father, it's really about being able to, to say, this, if I'm feeling this way and I act in this way, this is the most likely outcome, right? And that's what we call intelligence. But it starts with that first thing, being able to say, when I feel sad, I can feel it in this part of my body. When I feel angry, I can feel it in this part of my body. When I feel, overwhelmed, I'm more likely to experience it in this way. And that's where the literacy comes in. It's really about getting to know yourself. So I took those practices and illustrated them for my kids, because that's always my most important
your own children, right?
My most important clients, if you can call them that.
They are.
I illustrated it for my kids, and before I know it, I had a little children's book. I said, well, this kind of works really good for people of any age, but it's really kind of most digestible as a kid's book. And that's where the artist, and the other part intersect, because I just had a lot of fun drawing the expressions on the little guy, and playing, doing the exercises with my kids, and we tried it out for 6 months, and they said they liked it. It got the stamp of approval, so we published.
How nice. Aswad, this is Yawolu.
Yeah.
I have 2 questions. My first one is, how do we get the book?
Yes. So the book is available on Amazon. It can also, if you don't want to go through Amazon, you can contact myself or my wife Danielle directly through social media. That's how, and we have a couple of social media sites. So we're working on finding some alternative ways of making sure folks can access it. And we were kind of in the process of doing like another larger run and doing maybe a run of hardbacks when the pandemic hit. So that kind of put everything on hold.
And so how do they reach you on social media? Because I am boycotting Amazon.
No word. Yeah. So you can always reach me at Aswad Aarif is and that's either the Aswad Aarif Facebook page or Aswad Aarif Art and Design. Yeah.
Okay,
And then,
cool.
or you can reach my wife Danielle. Her name is Danielle with a Y, DANYELLE.
Spell that one more time. DAN.
YELLE.
Danielle Arif.
Yes, yeah. And she's often the better person to talk to if you want to do larger orders. She
Cool. And then my second question
Yes.
is if you could speak a little bit about the, I think, I don't want to get it wrong. Was it the male toxicity?
Oh, the
Toxic masculinity.
toxic
Okay, thank you.
masculinity.
Thank
Yeah.
you. See, I got it wrong.
Yeah.
Toxic masculinity.
Yeah. So that's me and another brother I work with named Kenny Moore. We had been kicking around this idea, and I think kind of going back to 2018, we had noticed the term being used a lot to describe what they call sort of externalized behaviors, right? So and of course this behavior is associated with chauvinism and sexism, and then it's also kind of these classic negative behaviors that were largely associated with men, but don't necessarily have to be male only behaviors, but they're kind of like these hallmark behaviors that in a lot of ways are a function of white supremacy in Western culture, so we started saying, well, started seeing the toxic masculinity is kind of this become this this thing that needs to be called out and addressed, but we weren't hearing a lot of good solutions that were inclusive, right? So if we're telling folks how not to be, how are we telling them how to be, right? What to do instead? And so again, it's kind of like with the trauma thing where people are focused, if you focus on a single incident trauma, it doesn't really help when you have a society that's out of balance, because toxic masculinity comes out of a toxic, a toxic culture that we all participate in. But there are certain things that men specifically can do because of the power differential that exists. So we started talking about how we can kind of help men to see how toxic masculinity doesn't just affect women; it affects men a lot more, in a lot of ways, and in the ways that we measure, right? Because the ways that we're talking about at the time, we're talking about suicidality, and we're talking about health outcomes, and we're talking about financial and social impacts. The same behaviors associated with toxic masculinity, while there's always exceptions, for the most part they're antisocial behaviors, and they're internalized antisocial behaviors. So the closing off and not sharing emotions and not reaching out for support, not seeking help, kind of like engaging in that old sort of American machoism. I'm gonna take care of this on my own until you die, until you. So we started talking about toxic masculinity in those terms. So how do we embrace vulnerability, honesty? How do we embrace, these kind of concepts of atonement and reciprocity as part of key facets of manhood, right? So that was kind of the foundation of the the Black men's circles to address toxic masculinity. So it's really sort of a practice space, to kind of talk about, not just to hear how you're doing everything right or be told what you're doing wrong, but to really kind of practice what would it be like to be vulnerable? What would it be like to share this side of yourself with your partner, and to share this side of yourself, with the people you care about, and to use that as your way to maintain relationships.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned atonement and reciprocity, and it makes
Mhm.
me, it reminds me of Ma'at, the principles of Ma'at.
Yeah.
It comes right out of that. So like that just comes right out of Egypt,
Right.
and so just and I love that you're mentioning the type of culture that we're in, the type of
Mhm.
dysfunctional society that we're in. And I think one of the concerns that I have, and it's around being an educator and working with young men, in the high school and middle school and even in the elementary school. And last week we were talking a little bit about the school to prison pipeline. And
Mhm.
we're like looking at like, these behaviors you're talking about in intimate family relations, but then also like how a person goes out into the world and maybe the mask that they possibly wear. And I think one of the things that our group is really interested in is like uplifting also Black men. Now's the time when like, we're a group where we're women, but we also want to uplift the family members that we have in the community. And I was just curious and wondering about like within your circles or with your book, or like what types of advice you would have, for Black men, even if it's, I taught in the schools. And so I know, having taught in San Francisco and Western Addition, Hunters Point, how many of the youth, like I would be worried about what would happen in their lives. And I don't want to mention this now,
Mhm.
but some of the destinies of some of the children that I taught, that some of them didn't get to be young men ever,
Right.
just to put it that way. But I'm just curious, like what kinds of wisdom can we share with people in this time, especially our young boys and our youth, and then
Mhm.
young men that struggle, young men that, like you were talking about feelings. A lot of men don't share their feelings. They're not able to do that. So I know you work in circles and with kids, and I'm just curious about, simple things that people could hold on to that would be good advice from you.
Yeah, one of the primary things that I recommend the brothers I work with to do is to begin to research and embrace inherent African and Indigenous wisdom, right? So uh, whether it is daily uh, uh, focusing on the principles of Ma'at, African proverbs, even more modern stuff like the Four Agreements, but to really kind of take a good look at those. One of the and I found this to be especially helpful in relationships, and amongst some of the stuff that I do with Black men for the last 5 years or so. My wife and I have also done from our home and in public spaces these Black love healing circles, where we work with couples and individuals to really kind of examine um, what Black love means, right? And not just in romantic relationships, but in family relationships and in engagement with people on the day to day. And one of the things that really kind of struck us that was vital around embracing and understanding this indigenous wisdom is that, you know, the culture that we're in has a very different way of thinking about how we relate to one another than some of the older ways of being. And for example, like we do a session where we talk about the concept of opposite sexes versus complementary sexes, right? So one of the things that you notice in African wisdom is there's always a balance, a male and a female, right? And neither is more important than the other, and they can't function without each other, right? So there's an inherent interconnectedness to you know, to that. It's one of the you know, it's one of the challenges that 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 kind of the Western mindset has with the idea of a gendered language like Spanish, you know, or or gendered practices that require a balance of the female and male energy inhabiting the same space. So, you know, sort of all that to say, when you begin to kind of look at it from the perspective, you know, that kind of takes us, you know, pre-colonial, we start to see that we have a lot of uh, uh, a lot of examples of male vulnerability, male sensitivity, male you know, male embracing the emotion as a way to better engage and to better live. But you know, you can be kind of blinded to that if you're kind of going by, this is what a man should be based on this European
Right.
Christian, right? That's really only in fact only existed, you know, since the, you know, since the 1700s. So it's not tried and true. It's not tested.
Right.
This idea of school being done, you know, in this way, or relationships being done in this way, or marriage being done in this way. So it's maybe not the best model to go from when you have other models that folks were using 40,000 years, you know, for generations and generations and generations.
Right.
So I would say, you know, try to embrace that inherent and ancient African and indigenous wisdom, because you get these other lessons about how we relate and how we communicate that you don't get with Western culture.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Aswad, hi, this is Sabrina.
Hi.
Thanks, nice seeing you again. You mentioned the balance of female and male energy.
Mhm.
And my question's around women's role in this. And because women are mothers, women are sisters, women are mothers of sons, and sisters have brothers, and how we can help. The question really is, what can we as women do to help support this? Because I feel myself and just my thoughts, we're brainwashed into this societal stereotype of what a man is supposed to be. And I think women naturally want men to protect them, right? They think, that is the role, but at what extent? And not to the point of violence or killing, or like, what does that mean? When I've heard that term, be the man of the house, that's something that mothers put that pressure on their sons before they're even ready. So I'm just using that term that so I want to get it right too, toxic masculinity, and how women can be more aware of it, and how they're not imposing or feeding into that as well with their sons and with their brothers as sisters. So kind of, yeah.
Yeah, I think the 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 answer to me that kind of that kind of responds most broadly is going to be rooted in safety and how we create a safe space for ourselves and others, right? So, and that has a lot to do, I think, with not so much protecting folks, but partnering, right? Because you kind of think about it as like going through a dark forest, right? You might not be able, you can't see any better than anybody else, right? But the safety comes by knowing that somebody there is holding your hand, right? So for our sons, that means making a safe space for them to maybe express emotions and encouraging them and talking with them about expressing emotions that society or our culture might not say is good for a man to do, right? The classic, it's not good for a man to cry, right? It's not good, it's not, it's not good for a man to, you got to man up and just do what you got to do. It's not good for a man to express things like disappointment and sadness and fear, right? So making sure that we not only tell our sons that it is okay to do that, but we then do things that reassure them that it is, right? We do things that let them know that, so we start changing up our language a little bit from, you cried too much to why are you crying, right? And really kind of practicing how we ask that so it doesn't sound like a judgment, it doesn't sound like punitive, but really I really want to know, because not because I want you to stop crying, but I want to, first for you to understand that it's perfectly normal. You feel what you feel, how you manage it, how you understand it, how you work through it. That's the holding the hand through the dark forest. I'm going to be here with you. We're going to figure this out together, right? So making that space of, for women, for their, for their partners, for for husbands, brothers, fathers, nephews, that it is, it's okay to express emotions that other places it might not be said. It's okay to express that with me, right? And then that's up to the individual relationship, right? That's up to the individual relationship. But being the one to, that hand in the dark, right? That hand in the dark is gonna hold your hand. I might not be able to fall apart anywhere else, but I could. But if I got this, I'm my auntie, my grandma, my wife, my sister, my mom. These are the people who I know they're not gonna judge me or put me down or impose those kind of cultural expectations on me. I can be myself. So that's the key thing, I think, to making sure that we're making folks feel safe, that we're doing everything we can to let them know it's safe to be yourself with me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And while you were speaking, great question, Sabrina. I was wondering, what are the implications for the boy or the young man who didn't get that when he goes out and has relationships? And do women become the want, 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 want? You remember the teacher from Charlie Brown?
Yeah.
Like if you don't seize those moments while they're younger, or I guess while they're safe at home,
Yeah.
and then when you're in working, when you're talking to now a grown man,
Mm-hmm.
how is the language different than, with your son? You can say you're safe here in this home with me, but now you're, maybe an adult male is living on his own, or he's your coworker, your big brother, and how is the language different than at that point when you see them trying to live up to society, a society that doesn't love them, doesn't appreciate them, still wants to call them boy. That dichotomy is crazy. But how, that's why I love that question so much, Sabrina. But how does the language change of,
Mm-hmm.
I want to support you, but I'm not making you into a boy when I ask you to be vulnerable, or it's such an interesting space to be in. Like,
Yeah.
how do you uplift the man without being too motherly? Okay, yeah.
No,
I'm
no,
talking
I'm
to
hearing you on that. No,
my 20-year-old and my 11-year-old.
no, that's a good question. I need the answer to that one.
All right. So
And the 49-year-old, like, everybody.
all right. So so for me, the implications for someone who didn't get that. Now I got a very mixed bag sort of upbringing. I'm 47 years old, and I was mostly my parents were together until I was 11, and then after that I mostly lived with my dad, and I got a very man's kind of upbringing. So I mean, I was brought up
Man's
with
world.
right. So I was brought up. So I'm the only boy with 6 sisters, and it was just like completely different sets of rules, So if my dad was up working, I had to be up working, and if there was something dirty, heavy, dangerous, I was expected to go out to the front. And I was second to the youngest, but it's like, you're the man, you're a man. And I'm very thankful for that upbringing, but I didn't realize until I got to be much older, it didn't really equip me very well for long-term relationships, or for the work that I ended up wanting to do. So, when I first started doing, work with at-risk youth and, young men who had really been through some stuff, I didn't know what to do. It's like, my friend got killed, and I was like, my friend got killed, and I'm fine, And I'm serious. That was how I was kind of responding to things, and I wasn't understanding that that's not the only way that we can do, and it doesn't leave a lot of space for a young person if their mentor or their or the person who they look up to is telling them, you're fine, you're a man, you're tough, you can get through anything. It doesn't allow them any space to say, no, I'm not, to say, I'm sad, I'm hurt. So, and it really kind of took me coming to this realization when I had my oldest son as a teenager, when he began to have some challenges with his mental health, and I really had to shift my whole approach. Right? It's like when they say when you're a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. Right? So I was like, I just tough love him into being all right, and it wasn't going to work. So I had to start asking, right? I had to start making that space, and to practice this idea of broad acceptance, right? I might not accept your behavior or anything or a thing that you've done, but I'm always going to accept you. And that kind of softness and that was all new to me, right? And it carried on into the work I was doing at that time with families, and it transformed the outcomes I was having. Right, I started to realize that there were solutions within some of the families that I was working with and young people that I was working with that were there, but I wasn't even asking the question. You know, I wasn't asking, how's everybody doing? I wasn't asking, you know, I was asking and answering. I was like, oh, y'all look fine, right? Everything appears to be great. And when I slowed down and stopped to ask, I found out, no, people weren't fine. You know, they weren't okay. They needed more. And it wasn't just solutions that money could solve. It wasn't just solutions that housing could solve. It wasn't just solutions that education could solve. A lot of the solutions were found in me giving my time and creating a space for them to talk with each other. And that's how I, you know, really kind of realized, well, for me, this is the real work, right? So that was the implication, that it's never too late to learn. It took an extreme situation for me to learn. I almost lost my son, you know, but that's what it took for me to learn. So that's one of the reasons I'm committed to sharing tools with other brothers, so it doesn't have to come to an extreme. So they don't have to lose relationships, jobs, their health. They can start to understand that there's different ways to approach manhood, and it doesn't require you to be, you know, the Lone Ranger. It doesn't require you to always be closed off and to never cry and to never slow down, you know. So in terms of, and then for your second question, in terms of what are the tools you can use with, the book is great for me. I think the book is great for little kids, but I don't know how a husband would respond to, how do you feel when you're sad? Where do you feel that in your body? It can feel, yeah.
You know that they're gonna go, okay. They're like, I'm going fishing. What does that mean? They're like,
right.
down, going fishing. Oh, you're fishing again?
Yeah.
But
so
no, so yeah, for the older men, yeah.
Yeah, so I think it comes down to it comes down to how do you respectfully ask those same sort of questions. My favorite tool is the restorative inquiry, right? So it's 5 questions that you ask folks, and I call this one it's almost like the relationship saver, right? Because you ever have your partner come and they, especially, this is a good one for men. This is one I always share with brothers, right? I tell them, did your wife or your girlfriend ever come to you and she talking about how she had this awful day at work and her boss seemed like she's out to get her, and then somebody took her parking space and they've been trying to, really just give her a hard time. They're trying to make her quit. And the first thing that comes out your mouth is, well, you know what you should have done, and then you messed up.
Exactly.
Right. So the practice is asking these questions and really giving the person the space to fully answer, right? And then when you do answer, you're using effective language to respond, to share your thoughts and feelings. So the questions are, what happened? If you're inviting someone to share, what happened? How do you feel about it? Right? Who was impacted? What needs to happen to make things right? And whose responsibility is it to make things right? Right? And then just the practice of giving people the space to answer those questions without responding, right? Without saying, I think that, just giving them the time and space. And then once they get through those questions, responding using effective language. And effective language is just language where we're taking accountability for our own insights, thoughts, and feelings, right? So instead of saying you should, you're saying I think, right? I think, I feel, I'm concerned, right? And what that does is give folks the opportunity to really genuinely process their own, because often when folks are coming to you, they're they're not looking for you to answer,
right,
give them a solution. They're just looking for you to listen, right? So that tool is one way that they can be a great invitation for, as you engage with men, um, to invite them to share their thoughts, feelings, and experiences. It feels respectful, right? Because it's an invitation and it's an inquiry. It doesn't feel intrusive, right? It doesn't feel like you're trying to extract a certain answer, or you're not following up questions with more questions. You're just leaving the space open,
Oh, okay.
right?
What I
For
do,
them to answer in that way.
I question too much.
Then it starts to feel a little. That can feel for some folks a little proby.
Yeah.
But it's practicing these 5 questions and how do you feel about it, and giving them the space to say how they feel,
Right.
right? If the answer is, I don't feel nothing about it, we accept it,
Mm-hmm.
right? But when you get to the effective questions at the end, or the effective statements at the end, those are the places where you can insert your thoughts and feelings,
Right. I
right?
guess.
But it's giving them this whole space to
Right.
be to express how they feel.
Right. As a teacher, as a classroom teacher, I was really good at that. But I
Yeah.
have to admit, in my household, not necessarily so.
I always encourage. I train a lot of teachers, and I always
Yeah,
encourage folks to try it out with your partner first.
yeah, like try it out in the home.
Because you get a lot of, I get a lot of buy-in from folks if they try it at home first. Because it's great for those hallway conversations too. It works really great with teenagers. And it's great for those quick hallway conversations, and you can get back to your class. But it's real good for partners too. It's real good for husbands and wives, especially if you're one of those helpful husbands who's always trying to say what you should have done. Keeps us out of trouble.
I bet it does. Wow. Thank
Yeah,
you so much.
my pleasure.
Um, oh, wow. That's a lot. And I have seen that work with young people too, because we've
Hmm.
also used restorative questions in the classroom with little ones all the way up to
Yeah,
seniors. And it's phenomenal. Yeah, I never thought to use it at home. But I'm
I
working
would,
on that.
I flip it. I suggest you start at home with it, and that's a good, safe place to practice it.
Right, right. So let's see. Um, Well, I want to ask you. So we've
Hmm.
had a really great discussion. I think we've covered a lot of different things. This is going to be great. Hopefully, we would love to bring you back when there's some young men on here, because that would be
Absolutely.
really great. That'd be really, really fascinating. Um, does anybody else have any questions for our brother before we release him and thank him for his time this evening? Well, is there
No,
anything? Oh, go ahead, Iyabo.
no, I just wanted to really thank you, Aswad, for gracing us not only with your presence, but really giving some wonderful pearls, because I'm like, ooh, I'm gonna use that on my little grandchildren
Yeah.
and, see how it works. But not only that, it just seems like I need to use that also with my children, my daughters. Open-ended. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah,
I,
I
I,
can. Mhm.
yeah, I also want to say sorry to interrupt you. I
No,
also
no.
want to say thank you because I wish I had learned some of that stuff, maybe 20 years ago, and because, in the way that I raise my children, some of that raising was toxic for my boys, for
Mhm.
my sons, and so it's now, they're 30s and 40s now. And so backtracking and like, okay, well, how do you feel? So some of those hidden feelings that are deep down, are starting to come out and be shared more. But, just the pressure of having to, not be able to express your feelings as a young person,
Yeah.
as a child and then a teen and then a young adult, and to wait that long to be able to express these emotions that are so deep down and hurtful. We're kind of going through that now. So the healing's starting now, but I wish I had, been able to practice some of those things in my home. So I really appreciate you. I think there's a lot that you could bring to the community. I'm also thinking that maybe when we bring our eldermen back, that you could also participate in that. We want to
Yeah,
right now focus
absolutely.
on the youth, but yeah, just like because all ages need that. You know.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Another
My
great
pleasure.
conversation with you.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
You once again. I don't know if you want to share. I don't. Is the Black Men Healing Circle still active? Do you want to share that information?
Yeah, my the one that I was uh running is not I was running it out of a space
Oh,
that
out of eight.
we bought, yeah, 893 Willow in West Oakland. We bought a 2,700 square foot mixed use building, and we had for up until the pandemic been using the commercial space as a early childhood learning space, and as well as a space for community usage. So we hosted drumming classes and dance. We really really wanted it to make it a space for uh, the arts and for community expression and healing. We also wanted to, and as part of a larger project that I'm passionate about, is around creating spaces for rest and respite for folks impacted by racialized trauma, right? So that is one of the uh, that is one of the things that I feel like could transform our communities, right? It's one of the direct impacts of the the experience of enslaved people is that we often do not sleep well. We don't rest well. We don't feel comfortable at rest, and that's the epigenetics at work, right? Um, so creating a space where people are welcome to just rest has been a passion project of mine. So this building is one of the first where I've been able to to kind of purchase space with that intention. But moving forward is something else I want to do. I'm looking to create something like a healing and rest sort of resort space for people to go who have been impacted by racialized trauma, right? So people who are the survivors of whose family members or close friends have been killed by racialized trauma in the U.S. People who are just overwhelmed with racialized experiences in the U.S., creating a space where they can go and engage in sort of rest and healing practices. The objective and sort of our mantra has become that we change relationships to change the world, right? So we start small with the relationship, but the relationships define our culture, defines who we are, right? So finding new ways for people to relate to, and maybe this answers a little bit better the question around: is it too late to reprogram or deprogram if we've kind of embedded, behaviors that are might call toxic masculinity or desensitized or flattened emotions in men? It's never too late, right? Because in transforming that relationship, it shows something to someone else and they can transform another relationship and another relationship. And if that keeps going, then we can actually change the world, right? We can change what it means to be Black, what it means to be Indigenous, what it means to be, descended from enslaved people. We can transform that through transforming the relationship, along with education and employment and financial. My passion is around changing how we think, feel, and act and engage in relationship to one another.
Beautiful. Wonderful. Thank you. So we
Yeah.
are going to end on that note. We have their information, and we're going to really encourage folks to get the book And then I know when 893 Willow Community Center is back up and running, we're
Right. We will.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll let folks know when we're back at when we're back up. Yeah.
Yes, and thank you with so much just gratitude for joining us. We really appreciate your time, your wisdom, your heart. You're very big, very, very just like sweet. You know.
Thank you.
Yes, sweetness. Thank you so much.
I'm blushing, but you can't see it. You'll never see it, but I'm blushing.
I can relate. That's why I have a flashlight. I'm trying to show this flashlight. So you can see me. So thank you once again, brother. And
Thank
on
you.
behalf of Luna Nueva Sisters, we honor you. Thank you.
Thank you all so much, and I appreciate you all so much for inviting me and for the work that you do.
Thank you.
You're welcome, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Same here.
We're talking more.
Right.
Have a good evening.
All right. Bye-bye, y'all.
Okay, good night, y'all.